Dale Vance laughed out loud when the lawyer reached the fire tower. "She can have the rust bucket," he said, not bothering to lower his voice. "Nobody's wanted that thing in 50 years. 19 years old, and Josie Vance had already buried 2 sets of hands that used to hold hers. First her mother and father 6 years back, then her grandfather 3 weeks ago, in the ground next to them. Her uncle walked out of that church basement with the house, the land, both trucks, and $260,000 in accounts nobody knew Earl Vance had. Josie walked out with a rusted key on a shoelace and a tower the county had condemned before she was born." The room laughed with Dale. She didn't say a word. She just closed her hand around that key, the one she'd worn around her neck for 2 years already, the one nobody had ever asked her about, and she kept it closed. Weeks later, alone at the bottom of that tower, boots in the mud, deed envelope tucked under one arm, she lifted the key off her neck and put it in the lock. But before the key, before the laughing, there was a folding chair in a church basement and 40 other folding chairs just like it, and a thin man named Broyles reading a dead man's last wishes out loud to a room that mostly wanted to get it over with. The basement of Sable Hollow Baptist smelled like coffee left too long on a burner, and the particular mildew of a building that flooded every spring and got mopped every spring and never quite dried out between. Fold-out tables lined one wall, left over from some potluck. Josie sat in the second row in Earl's old flannel jacket, sleeves rolled twice at the cuff so her hands could still show, because the jacket had been built for a 6'2" man who spent 40 years climbing steel, and she was built smaller than that. She'd worn it every Sunday for 2 years running, driving up before sunrise to stoke his wood stove and knock the ice off the tower stairs so the steps wouldn't buckle, waiting on a man too sick to use them. Nobody in that basement had done that. She had. Dale sat up front in a golf shirt, checking his phone twice before Broyles even opened the folder. "Let's get through this," Dale said. "I've got a closing in Brevard at 2. Broyles didn't look up. "The house at 4 Sourwood Lane and the 11 acres attached, to Dale Earl Vance. The 1998 Ford and the utility truck, to Dale Earl Vance." He turned a page. Dale nodded along like he was checking off a grocery list he'd already memorized. "The decommissioned fire lookout on Forest Service lease land, parcel 14, along with the personal effects inside it," Broyles said, "to Josephine Earl Vance." That was when Dale laughed. "She can have the rust bucket," he said, loud enough for the back row. "Nobody's wanted that thing in 50 years. A woman 2 rows back, somebody's aunt, made a small sound like a laugh that hadn't decided yet if it was allowed to be one. Josie didn't turn around. She kept her eyes on Broyles, on the paper in his hand, on the one line under the parcel description that Dale hadn't heard because he was already looking at his phone again. "There's also this," Broyles said, and held up a small brass key on a length of braided leather, sealed once inside an envelope that somebody, Earl probably, had marked in pencil. J. Mr. Vance left specific instruction the key go to Josephine and to no one else. "It's a key to a condemned building," Dale said. "There's nothing in there but bird mess and a wood stove that hasn't worked since Clinton." "That may be," Broyles said, and set the key down in front of Josie without looking at Dale again. "It's still what he asked for." Josie already had a key just like it. She'd carried her own for 2 years, on a shoelace under her shirt, since the day Earl handed it to her at the foot of the tower stairs and said, "Don't lose this," and didn't explain why, and she never asked, because that was how it worked between them. She didn't tell Broyles that. She didn't tell Dale. She picked up the new one, the sealed one, and put it in her jacket pocket and said nothing, because there wasn't anything worth saying to a room already moving on to the part where they split up folding chairs. Outside, in the gravel lot, Dale caught up to her before she made it to the truck. "No hard feelings, right?" He said it like a man closing a deal, hand half out like he might shake on it. "Dad's mind wasn't what it used to be at the end. You know that. A tower's a tower." "It's not worth anything, Josie. County condemned the cab in '99. You can't even get insurance on it." "Okay," she said, "I mean it. Boat dealership's not going to run itself. I already put money down." He said it like it was information she needed, like she'd asked. "You want, I can see if anybody at the county wants that lease released. Save you the trouble." I said, "Okay, Dale." He looked at her a second too long, the way people look at something they've already decided isn't worth the look. Then he got in his truck and pulled out of the lot too fast for gravel, throwing up a little cloud of dust that drifted across the church sign, the one that still had Earl Vance, beloved father and grandfather, on the marquee from the funeral 3 weeks back. Nobody had changed the letters yet. Josie stood there a minute with the new key warm in her pocket, sitting right against the old one on its shoelace, 2 keys for the same lock, and didn't understand why Earl had wanted it that way. She didn't understand a lot of things Earl did in those last months. He'd stopped talking much toward the end, mostly pointed at what he needed, mostly slept. But some habits he kept right up until the hospital bed took over the front room. He kept a NOAA weather radio on the nightstand and made her read him the barometric pressure every morning like it still mattered whether a storm was coming in over the ridge. She could split a cord of kindling one-handed by the time she was 16 because he'd taught her, patiently, the winter after her parents died, like it was the only kind of comfort either of them had words for. She could read a topo map faster than most of the deputies in that county because Earl had made her learn the whole watershed above Sable Hollow before he'd let her drive the fire road alone. None of that showed up in a will. None of it was worth anything at a courthouse. She drove home that night to the room she was renting over the Pruitt family's garage, 6 miles down 215 from where Earl's house used to be hers to visit. And she didn't cry, not because she didn't want to, but because she'd used most of that up already in the 3 weeks since the funeral. She lay on top of the covers with both keys on the nightstand next to a phone with $41 left in checking and a job at the Sable Hollow IGA that paid every other Friday. And she thought about the tower standing up there in the dark on its ridge, locked, the way it had been locked her whole life, the cab door welded shut by rust more than by any actual lock. She didn't climb it that night. She didn't climb it for 3 more weeks after that, not because she forgot, but because some part of her wasn't ready to be the only Vance left who still had a reason to. Word got around Sable Hollow fast the way it always did, faster than the obituary had. Josie got the tower, Dale got the money. People said it kind mostly the way people say things kind right before they say the real thing. "Bless her heart," said a woman at the IGA register, loud enough to be heard 2 aisles over, not quite loud enough to be blamed for it. Getting handed a rusted-out tower like that, like a consolation prize. "Earl always did favor her," said somebody else, the way people say favor when they mean something closer to burdened. Nobody in town called it an inheritance. They called it a joke, gently, the way you'd talk about a dog that got left a house and a will on the news somewhere far away, funny and sad at the same time, nothing to do with the actual person standing at the register bagging their groceries. Josie didn't argue with any of it. She'd learned that from Earl, too, the useful kind of quiet, the kind where you let people finish talking before you decided what was true. 3 weeks after the funeral, she drove up Route 215 alone on a Saturday morning before the IGA opened, past the county recorder's office half a mile before the turnoff, past the gate Hollis Pruitt still kept a key to from his 30 years training under Earl, up the switchbacks where the pavement gave out to gravel and the gravel gave out to nothing but 2 ruts and the mountain. The truck's heater didn't work above 4,000 feet, not really, and she drove with both hands on the wheel and Earl's flannel jacket zipped to her chin. The tower stood at the top the way it always had, 4 steel legs bolted into bedrock, 100 feet of stairs switching back on themselves all the way up to a cab that looked from the ground like a shoebox somebody forgot to bring back down. Rust had eaten the railings orange in streaks. A no trespassing sign from the Forest Service hung crooked on the lower landing, half the letters gone silver with weather. She stood at the bottom a long time before she started climbing, the deed envelope tucked under one arm, the 2 keys, hers and Earl's, both warm from her pocket. Somewhere below the ridge a dog barked once and quit. Wind moved through the steel legs and made a sound like something breathing. At the top, 90-some steps later, lungs burning in the thin cold air, she stood in front of a door that hadn't opened in longer than she'd been alive, and she took the sealed key, the new one, out of her pocket. She put it in the lock. The lock turned easier than it should have for something nobody had touched in years, a little grease left in the tumblers, Earl's doing probably some Sunday she never knew about. The door swung out instead of in, and it caught on rusted hinges, screeching once, then went quiet. Cold air came out to meet her, the kind of cold that sits in a closed room and doesn't move for a long time. Josie stepped inside. The cab was smaller than she remembered from being a kid, Back when Earl still worked it, and she'd come up on Saturdays to watch him scan the ridgeline with binoculars twice her size. Windows ran the whole way around, 4 walls of glass gone cloudy with dust and pollen, so the light inside came soft and yellow, like it was filtered through old paper. A cot sat built into the back wall, thin mattress still on it, a wool blanket folded at the foot the way Earl always folded things. Tight corners, no slack. A wood stove stood in the corner, small enough to fit a cabin, its pipe running up through the roof. Rust had crept along the seams, but the door still shut with a click when she nudged it. A shelf ran along one wall, and on it sat a row of spiral notebooks, spines cracked, years written on the covers in pencil. 1975, 1976, on and on, decade after decade, some water-stained, some crisp like Earl had bought them yesterday. She picked one up. 1988. Inside, in handwriting she'd know anywhere, small and even, slanting right. Wind out of the northwest, 10 to 15. Visibility good. No smoke sighted. Page after page of that. Weather. Wind. Smoke or no smoke. Some days just one line, some days 3. She sat down on the edge of the cot, the notebook still open in her lap, and for a minute she didn't do anything but look around the room her grandfather had spent 40 years of his life inside. NOAA, radio on a shelf by the cot, the same model he'd kept on his nightstand at the end, like he'd carried the habit down off the mountain with him when his knees finally gave the job up. A coffee tin repurposed for pencils. A calendar from a feed store, curling at the corners, stopped on a month from years back. It smelled like wood smoke and cold metal and something sweeter underneath, cedar maybe, from a chest she hadn't noticed yet in the corner. She didn't cry. She'd promised herself she wouldn't, not up here, not the first time. She just sat there a while with the notebook, running her thumb along the edge of the page like that might tell her something the words didn't. At her feet, where the cot met the wall, she noticed the floorboards didn't quite match. A seam ran a little crooked, a little too straight to be original construction. She pressed the toe of her boot against it. Something under there gave, just slightly, like the board wasn't nailed the way the rest of the floor was. She knelt down and put her fingers against the seam. It held. She pulled again, harder, and felt it lift maybe a 1/4 inch before it caught on something and stopped. Not rot, not warped wood, built that way on purpose to open. Her heart went up into her throat a little. She thought about prying it the rest of the way right then, alone, with nobody around for a mile but the wind moving through the tower's legs. Instead, she sat back on her heels. She didn't know why she stopped. Maybe because some part of her didn't want to open something Earl built with his own hands by herself, the first time, with nobody there to see it. Maybe because a note he'd left once, taped inside her school lunchbox the year her parents died, had said only, "Trust your gut, Josie," and her gut said, "Wait." She put the notebook back on the shelf, careful, spine facing out the way the others were, and stepped back outside onto the landing, pulling the door shut behind her. It didn't lock again. She didn't need it to. Nobody came up here but her. Going down the switchback stairs took longer than going up, her knees shaking some by the bottom, not from the climb but from something else she didn't have a word for yet. Her truck sat where she'd left it, nose pointed downhill on the gravel turnout. She almost missed it. A white envelope was tucked under the driver's side wiper, damp at one corner from the morning fog, her name written across the front in handwriting she didn't recognize. Just Josie. No last name. She pulled it free and stood there in the cold with the tower behind her and opened it right there, because whatever it was, it couldn't wait either. 2 $20 bills folded around a scrap of paper, torn from something bigger, notebook paper maybe, edges rough. Gas money. Earl helped my boy once, a long time back, when nobody else would have. Didn't ask for it back. Figured it was time somebody paid a little of it forward. Don't need to know who. No signature. No name. She stood there and read it twice, then a third time, $40 folded into her palm, and looked down the mountain toward Sable Hollow, like she might see whoever left it still driving away. The road was empty. Just fog sitting low over the tree line, the way it did most mornings up here. $41 in her checking account. Now this. She didn't know who Earl had helped or when or how, only that whoever it was had climbed a half-mile of gravel road on foot or driven up in something quiet enough she hadn't heard it from 90 feet up, and left this without waiting around to be thanked. She folded the note back into the envelope and put it in the jacket pocket where the sealed key used to sit, and got in the truck, and didn't start the engine right away. She just sat there a minute, hands on the wheel, looking up at the tower through the windshield, small against all that sky, and thought about the floorboard that gave a quarter inch and stopped. She'd be back, not today, but soon. Driving down, she passed the turnoff to Hollis Pruitt's place, a low ranch house with a Forest Service decal still stuck faded in the truck window parked out front. 30 years retired and still driving the same green pickup he'd driven the whole time he worked under Earl. She didn't stop. She wasn't ready to explain the floorboard to anybody yet, not even him, not until she understood it herself. She didn't know yet that Hollis already knew more about that tower than she did. She didn't know he still had a key to the access gate on his ring, worn smooth from 30 years of use, or that Earl had called him more than once in those last sick months and talked low on the phone about something he wanted done right, when the time came, for Josie and nobody else. She just drove home past the church sign that still read Earl's name on the marquee, past the IGA where she'd clock in at 6 the next morning for $8.50 an hour, and tried to hold both things at once, the ache of the empty cab and the strange comfort of $40 from a stranger who remembered a kindness her grandfather never once mentioned to her. Some part of her understood, without being able to say it yet, that Earl Vance had spent his whole life quietly leaving things behind him. Gas money, a worked-loose floorboard, a room full of notebooks nobody else had bothered to read. She just didn't know yet how much was still waiting under that floor. She went back on a Tuesday, not a Saturday, because the IGA gave her the day off unpaid, and unpaid days off were the only time she had. She almost didn't stop at the gate. Hollis Pruitt's green truck was parked crossways at the turnoff, blocking the ruts, and he was standing beside it with his thumbs in his belt like he'd been waiting an hour. "Heard you drove up here alone last week," he said. "No hello first, just that." "I did. Anybody see you go up the stairs by yourself?" "No, sir." He nodded slow, like that confirmed something he already suspected. Earl wouldn't have liked that. Man was careful about a lot of things most folks never noticed. He got in his truck without asking and waited for her to pull around him, then followed her up in his own rig, gravel popping under both trucks the rest of the way. At the base of the tower, he looked up at it a long time before he said anything else. 30 years I worked under that man. Learned to read smoke off him before I could read a road map. He said it plain, not sentimental, the way you'd state a fact about the weather. "I ought to have come up here with you the first time. I'm sorry I didn't. You didn't know. I knew enough." He started climbing before she did. 90-some steps later, both of them breathing hard in the cold, she unlocked the cab door with the same key from before. It swung easier this time. Hollis stepped in behind her and stopped just inside the frame, looking around slow, at the cot, the stove, the shelf of notebooks, like he was reading a room he used to know by heart and finding it changed. "He kept that stove going even after the state cut the budget for wood," he said. "Bought his own kindling, never told nobody." Josie knelt by the cot and pressed her boot against the seam in the floor. "There's something under here." Hollis crouched down next to her, knees cracking. "Show me." She pulled at the board. It lifted the same quarter inch it had before, then caught. Hollis put 2 fingers under the edge next to hers. "On 3, he said, and counted it out loud. 1, 2, 3. And together they pulled, and the board came free with a crack of old glue giving way, dust rising into the yellow light. Underneath sat a metal box, olive drab, dented at one corner, the kind of ammo tin surplus stores sold by the crate back when Earl was young. Josie lifted it out. It was heavier than it looked. She set it on the floor between them and worked the latch, rusted stiff, until it gave. Inside, wrapped in a plastic feed sack, sat a smaller box, steel gray, a real lockbox with a keyhole in the front, no bigger than a shirt button. And next to it, a glass mason jar, packed tight with coins that caught the window light and threw it back silver instead of copper. Hollis went quiet. He didn't reach for the jar right away. He picked it up slow, both hands, turned it once, looking at the coins through the glass like he was checking they were real. "Josie," he set the jar down careful, like it might crack. These are silver dollars. Old ones. Before 1965, this jar's not worth $1 a coin. It's worth whatever silver's running that day, times the weight, and that's not small money. He picked one coin out through the loosened lid and held it to the light. This right here, by itself, might run you $25, $30 on a slow day. There's got to be near 200 coins in that jar. Josie did the math without meaning to, and her mouth went dry. And that's just the jar, Hollis said. That little box there's locked. I'd bet my truck there's more in it than coins. She tried the small key from her pocket, the sealed one Broyles had handed her at the reading. It didn't fit the little steel box. She checked the brass one on her shoelace, the one Earl gave her years back. It slid into the lockbox's tiny keyhole like it had been cut for it, because it had. The lid opened stiff, hinges dry. Inside lay a stack of paper bonds, government issue, dates going back decades, and under those, 3 more notebooks, thinner than the weather logs on the shelf, spines labeled in Earl's hand. Not years, numbers, ledger entries. Josie opened the top one. Columns, dates, small deposits, $5, $10, once in a while $20. Going back to 1988, every entry initialed EV. Same slanted hand as the weather logs, but these weren't about wind and smoke. These were about money, added a little at a time, decade after decade, in a tower nobody thought was worth visiting. Taped inside the lid of the lockbox, half peeled at one corner, was an index card. Josie's fingers went cold, reading it before her eyes even finished. For Josie, when she's ready to climb all the way up. She sat back on her heels and didn't say anything for a minute. Hollis didn't either. He just looked at the card, then at her, and let the quiet sit there the way Earl always had, like some things didn't need filling. He wrote that, Hollis said finally, a long time before you'd have understood it. How long? Judging by that first ledger entry? Going on 40 years. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Man drew a state salary of maybe $11,000 a year most of that time. Wasn't rich, wasn't poor either. Not the way this county figured him. He looked at the coins again, the bonds, the ledgers. This wasn't luck, Josie. This was a man doing the same small thing over and over on purpose for somebody who wasn't even born yet when he started. She thought about the church marquee that still said his name, about Dale saying the tower wasn't worth anything, couldn't get insurance on it, save you the trouble, about the woman at the IGA register saying bless her heart loud enough for 2 aisles to hear. Dale doesn't know about this, she said. No, and he won't hear it from me. Hollis closed the lockbox lid, careful, and set it back inside the ammo tin like he was tucking a child in. But I'll tell you this much. Your uncle already spent every dollar the county appraised that estate at. If word gets out there's more sitting up here than what he took, he is not going to take it well. What do? First thing, you don't tell nobody in town. Second thing, you get this photographed and counted proper, with a witness, before you move 1 coin off this mountain. Third thing. He stood up, knees popping again, and looked down at her still kneeling by the open floor. You let me call somebody I trust at the recorder's office. Earl wasn't sloppy about anything in his whole life. If he hid money for you up here, my money says he didn't just hide it. He filed something on it too, somewhere a long time back. Josie looked at the ledger in her lap, the coins in the jar throwing soft light against the cloudy windows, the note taped inside the lid in handwriting she knew better than her own. He never said 1 word about any of this, she said. Not once. That was Earl, Hollis said. Man could carry a secret 40 years and never once let it show on his face. He picked up the ammo tin to carry it down himself, both hands under it like it held something breakable instead of steel. Come on, let's get this off the mountain before anybody else decides to come looking. They went down together, the tin between them, the floorboard left open behind them for the first time in decades, and neither one of them said much the rest of the way because there wasn't a version of it that fit into words yet. Not for her, and maybe not for him either. At the bottom, Hollis set the tin careful on his truck seat and looked back up at the tower 1 more time before he shut the door. Your grandfather, he said, was the most patient man I ever knew. He said it like a fact, not a compliment, the way you'd read a gauge. Guess we're finding out just how patient. Neither of them knew yet that 3 days later, A certified letter would land in Josie's mailbox with Dale's lawyer's name printed in the corner, or that the word patient was about to get tested in a courthouse instead of a tower. The letter came on a Friday, not that it mattered which day. Josie's hands weren't steady when she opened it. It came from a law office in Brevard. Whitfield and Combs, the letterhead said, attorney Marcus Whitfield, representing Dale Vance. She read it standing at her own mailbox, boots still on from her shift at the IGA. Notice of petition to determine estate property. That was the heading. Underneath, in smaller print, it said any personal property discovered on Tower premises after the date of the will's execution belonged to the general estate, not to any single heir. A hearing date, 3 weeks out, County Courthouse, Brevard, 10 in the morning. She read it twice before the words settled. Dale knew. Somebody had told him about the floor. She called Hollis from her kitchen that night, phone pressed so hard to her ear it left a mark. He's saying it's not mine, she said. The coins, the bonds, all of it. Hollis didn't answer right away. She could hear him breathing on the other end, slow, like he was working something out in his head before he'd let it out his mouth. Read me the exact wording, he said. She read it to him line by line. That's his lawyer's language, not his, Hollis said when she finished. Dale wouldn't know a probate statute from a phone book. Somebody's coaching him. What do I do? You come to town tomorrow, not the courthouse, the diner. He paused. And you bring that ledger with you. Not the coins, just the ledger. The diner sat on Main Street in Sable Hollow, the kind of place with a laminated menu that hadn't changed in 15 years and a bell over the door that announced everybody. Josie got there early. Dale's lawyer got there earlier. Marcus Whitfield had on a jacket too clean for a county this size, and he stood up when she walked in like manners might soften what came next. Miss Vance. He didn't offer his hand. Appreciate you meeting me. Didn't know I had a choice. You always have a choice. He smiled like that was supposed to be reassuring. That's actually why I wanted to talk. Outside a courtroom. Save everybody the trouble. She sat down across from him and didn't order anything. My client isn't trying to take what's yours, Whitfield said. He's trying to clarify what's the estate's. There's a difference, legally speaking. There's 40 years of ledgers with my name in them, Josie said. That's not legal language. That's just true. Whitfield's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes did. Here's my concern, he said. You're 19. No lawyer of your own. A hearing like this can get expensive, drawn out, ugly for a family already grieving. He folded his hands on the table. Dale's prepared to offer you $5,000 today to withdraw any claim beyond the Tower parcel itself. Clean, simple, no courtroom. $5,000. 6 months ago, that number would have flattened her, would have paid off her mother's old medical bills, bought a car that started every morning, covered a year of rent somewhere warm. She thought about the jar of coins, about the note taped inside the lid. No, she said. Whitfield tilted his head. You haven't heard the number climb yet. I could go to 8. It's not about the number. She stood up, chair scraping the floor. It's about what's already got my name on it. She left him sitting there with a coffee he hadn't touched, the bell over the door ringing behind her louder than she meant to let it. Hollis was waiting outside in his truck. How'd it go? He said, not really a question. He offered me $8,000 to walk away. Hollis let out a breath through his nose, something between a laugh and a growl. That tells you something, he said. Man doesn't offer $8,000 for nothing. He knows what's up. There's worth a good deal more than that. How much more? Get in the truck. I want to show you something before that hearing, not after. He drove her past the church, past the IGA, all the way to the far end of Broad Street, where the county recorder's office sat in an old brick building with white columns that had needed paint since before Josie was born. Hollis parked crooked and didn't apologize for it. Inside, a woman behind the counter named Renata Sills looked up and smiled the second she saw Hollis, the kind of smile that said they went back years. Hollis Pruitt, she said, don't tell me you're filing a claim on something, not me, her. He nodded at Josie. We need anything on record under Earl Vance. Property, deeds, memorandums. Anything at all going back 40 years. Renata's smile faded into something more careful. She typed for a minute, frowned at the screen, typed again. There's a deed memorandum, she said slowly. Recorded in 1991, filed personally by Earl Vance. She looked up. That's unusual. Most folks don't file memorandums on personal property. That's for land, easements. Can we see it? Josie said. Renata pulled it up on microfilm in the back room, the machine humming and clicking while she scrolled. When the image steadied, Josie leaned in close enough to smell the old paper smell coming off the screen, even though it was just light on glass. It was short. 1 page. Earl's signature at the bottom. Notarized. Dated March the 4th, 1991. Memorandum of specific bequest. Personal property held within the fire lookout tower structure. Sable Hollow, Transylvania County, including but not limited to currency, coin, and negotiable instruments accumulated by the undersigned, is hereby declared the specific and sole property of Josephine Erlene Vance, granddaughter, upon her reaching the age of majority or upon the undersigned's death, whichever comes later. Not general estate property, not subject to division among other heirs. Josie's own middle name looked strange to her on the screen. Erlene. After him. He filed this 35 years ago, she said, barely above a whisper. I wasn't even born yet. March of 91, Hollis said, doing the math out loud. You came along in 2007. He wrote your name into a legal filing 16 years before you existed. Renata sat back from the machine. I've worked this counter 22 years, she said. I've never seen anybody file something like this for a person who wasn't born. She looked at Josie, something soft crossing her face. Your grandfather really did that. He filed it and never told a soul, Hollis said. Not me, not the county attorney. Just did it quiet and let it sit here, waiting. Josie stared at the screen until her eyes burned. This means Dale can't touch it, she said. Doesn't it? Not the petition, not any of it. Hollis nodded slow. This means Dale's lawyer offered you $8,000 to sign away something worth 10 times that, and he was hoping you'd never find this page. He tapped the screen. Now we've got it certified, copied, and dated, ahead of anything Dale's filed. That's not a fight anymore, Josie. That's just a hearing where somebody reads the truth out loud. Renata was already printing a certified copy, the machine chugging out warm paper into the tray. I'll swear to this in front of a judge myself if I have to, she said, sliding the copy across the counter. Man deserves that much. Josie folded the page careful, like it might tear if she wasn't gentle, and put it inside her jacket next to the gas money envelope that was still there from weeks back. Outside, the afternoon had gone gray, clouds sitting low over the ridge the way they did before rain. 3 weeks, Josie said, more to herself than to Hollis. 3 weeks, he agreed, and this time we walk in with paper older than Dale's whole petition. He looked at her a long moment. Your grandfather waited 35 years for this exact day, Josie. Don't you dare walk in there scared. She thought about Earl's handwriting on that index card taped inside the lockbox when she's ready to climb all the way up. She hadn't understood, standing in that cab with dust in the air, how many ways there were left to climb. Word got around Sable Hollow faster than Josie expected, the way it always did in a town with 1 stoplight and 1 IGA. She was ringing up a sack of dog food 2 days after the recorder's office when a woman she barely recognized stepped up to her register, waited for the customer ahead to clear out, then leaned in close. You're Earl Vance's granddaughter, the woman said. Not a question. Yes, ma'am. Name's Ruth Ann Combs. You wouldn't know me. She set a loaf of bread on the belt like it was an afterthought. 14 years back, my boy needed surgery insurance wouldn't touch. $3,000 near enough. Money showed up in an envelope on my porch. No name on it. Josie's hands went still on the register. I didn't put that there, she said. I know you didn't. You'd have been 5 years old. Ruth Ann's eyes were wet, though her voice stayed steady. I always figured it was your grandfather. Never could prove it. Man never once mentioned it to my face. She paid for the bread in exact change, counted out to the penny. You tell that judge, whoever's going after what's yours, they're going after more than money. They're going after the only proof half this county's got that somebody looked out for them. She left before Josie could answer, bell over the door ringing behind her the same as it had for Whitfield at the diner, except this time it didn't feel like a threat walking out. It felt like a door opening the other way. Josie told Hollis about it that evening, sitting on his porch steps while his dog worked over a bone in the grass. That's 3 now, he said. 3? Somebody left you gas money the week of the funeral. Now Ruth Ann. Earl helped more folks in this county than anybody ever gave him credit for, and not one of them ever said so out loud till now. He looked at her sideways. You know why they're saying it now? Why? Because now there's a reason to. Dale's trying to paint your grandfather as some fool who died sitting on a pile of money he never once used for good. These folks know different. They just needed somebody to ask. Josie turned that over. Nobody's asking them anything yet. They will, Hollis said. Word's already moving faster than either one of us can push it. He didn't get much further than that before his phone buzzed on the step beside him, screen lighting up with a number he didn't know. He answered it, listened, said maybe 4 words total, and hung up looking harder than he had a minute before. That was Renata, he said. Dale's lawyer pulled a copy of the memorandum this afternoon, same one we saw. How's that bad? It's not bad by itself. It's what he did after. Hollis stood, joints popping, and walked to the porch rail like he needed the wood under his hands. Whitfield filed something new this morning. Motion to compel a handwriting examination. Wants a forensic document examiner to look at Earl's signature, the notary seal, all of it. Says if the memorandum's not authenticated proper, court can't weigh it at the hearing. Can they do that? They can ask. Judge decides. He rubbed the back of his neck. Costs money, though. Examiner like that runs $4,000 or $5,000, and somebody's got to pay for it up front. Dale doesn't have that anymore, Josie said slowly. Not free and clear. Not after the down payment on that dealership. No, Hollis said. He doesn't. Which tells me exactly how scared he is. He hadn't finished that sentence long before headlights swung into his driveway, gravel popping under tires driven too fast for a residential street. Dale's truck. Josie hadn't seen her uncle in person since the will reading, and for a second neither of them moved, like the truck itself needed convincing to stop. Dale got out alone, no lawyer this time, jacket half-zipped like he'd left the house without deciding to. Figured you'd be here, he said to Josie, not looking at Hollis at all. Evening, Dale, Hollis said anyway. Dale ignored that too. You went to the recorder's office. It wasn't a question either. I did, Josie said. That paper doesn't change what's fair. His voice had an edge in it she hadn't heard before. Not anger exactly. Something closer to the sound a man makes when the floor's moving under him. Dad worked that tower his whole life. That money should have built something for this family. Not sat in a jar for one granddaughter while the rest of us got nothing. You got the house, Josie said. You got both trucks. $260,000, Dale. That's what the estate paid out to you. That's different. How? He didn't answer that right away. He looked past her, out at the dark tree line like the tower itself might be visible from Hollis's porch, though it wasn't, not from here. I already put money down on the Brevard lot, he said finally, quieter now. $40,000, non-refundable, based on what I thought I had coming. Bank's expecting the rest by fall. He looked back at her. You understand what happens to me if that hearing doesn't go my way. I understand you made a bet, Josie said, before you knew what was really up there. I made a decision based on what my father's estate was worth on paper. Then maybe, Hollis said, stepping down off the porch now, voice even but not soft. You ought to have waited on the paper before you signed anything, Dale. Earl taught me that much, watching fire lines for 30 years. You don't move on a report you haven't confirmed. Dale's jaw worked like he wanted to say something back and couldn't find the right size for it. This hearing, he said instead, turning to Josie one more time, doesn't have to be ugly. Whitfield can withdraw the motion. We split it. 60-40 my favor, and we're done before it ever gets in front of a judge. You offered me $8,000 2 weeks ago to walk away from all of it, Josie said. Now you want 60% of it instead. That's not an offer, Dale. That's just fear with a number attached. Something crossed his face then, quick, gone before she could name it for certain, but it looked like he knew she was right and hated that she'd said it out loud. He got back in his truck without another word, backed out too fast again, tail lights swinging red across the yard before the dark took them. Hollis watched the road a long moment after the sound of the engine faded. That man's scared of losing everything he already spent, he said. Scared men do foolish things in courtrooms. That works for us, not against us. The handwriting examiner, Josie said. What if they find something wrong with it? Won't, Hollis said. I watched Earl sign 100 fire reports over 30 years. That man's hand never wavered once, not even the year his own wife passed. Whatever examiner Whitfield hires is going to tell him the same thing Renata already knows for free. He started back toward the porch, then stopped, looking at her carefully. But I want you ready for something else, Josie. Word's getting out now. Ruth Ann won't be the last one to come find you. Some of them are going to want to stand up at that hearing and say so, out loud, in front of the judge. Why would that matter to a judge deciding about paperwork? Might not, legally, Hollis admitted. But your grandfather spent 40 years being invisible in this county except to the people he helped quiet. If this hearing turns into the one place all of that finally gets said out loud, in front of Dale, in front of everybody. He shook his head slow. That's not evidence. That's just the truth catching up to a man who spent his whole life pretending his father never had one worth telling. The examiner's report came back 9 days later, faster than anyone expected. Renata called Hollis first, since she'd started treating the case like it was half hers by now. Get Josie down here, she said. You'll want to hear this in person, not over the phone. They met at the recorder's office again. Same back room, same humming machine. Whitfield showed up too, jacket a little less pressed than before. He set a manila folder on the counter like it weighed more than it did. Dr. Feynman's report, he said. Handwriting and ink analysis. Notary seal verification. He didn't open it right away. I'll be straight with you both. It's not what my client hoped for. Renata read it out loud, since it was addressed to the court and not to any one person. Signature consistent with 14 known exemplars of Earl Vance's hand, spanning 1968 to 1998. Notary seal authentic, matching county records for that date. Ink chemistry consistent with period-appropriate ballpoint. No indication of forgery, alteration, or backdating. Josie let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. So it's real, she said. Officially. Officially, Whitfield said. He closed the folder without ceremony. Cost my client $4,800 to confirm what your grandfather already knew was true. He looked at Josie a long moment, something almost like respect flickering behind the tired eyes. For what it's worth, Miss Vance, I told Dale this was a risk before he spent the money. Why'd he do it anyway? Josie asked. Because he needed to believe there was a way out, Whitfield said. Lawyers can't always talk a client out of hope, even bad hope. He picked up the folder, tucked it under his arm, and headed for the door, then stopped halfway. The hearing's still 3 weeks out, he said. I'd expect my client to try something else before then. He's not a man who stops at one bad idea. He was right. It took 4 days. Josie was up at the tower on a Saturday morning, sweeping the cab floor where the panel had come loose, when her phone buzzed with a text from Hollis. Call me now, not later. She sat down on the cot and called. Dale's filed an emergency motion, Hollis said. No greeting. Wants the court to order the lockbox, the jar, the logbooks, all of it, surrendered into court custody before the hearing. Says he's worried about, quote, preservation of evidence. Meaning what? Meaning he wants it out of your hands and into a courthouse safe where he figures it's easier to argue about later. Maybe he thinks if it's not physically yours, a judge might see it different. Josie looked around the cab, at the panel still propped open, at the ammo tin sitting where she'd left it that morning like an old friend. Can he do that? He can ask, Hollis said again, same as before. Judge has to decide fast though, since it's marked emergency. Might rule on it as soon as Monday. What happens if the judge says yes? Then a deputy shows up here with a court order, and you hand it over, Hollis said. That's not the end of the world, Josie. It just means the county's holding it instead of you, till the hearing settles who it belongs to, and if he says no, then Dale spent more money for nothing, and he looks worse in front of the same judge he needs to trust him in 3 weeks. Hollis paused. I already called Renata. She's willing to write a letter to the court saying the memorandum's on permanent public record. Notarized, filed years back, says there's no risk of anything disappearing, since the county's already got a certified copy sitting in their own files. Would that help? Might. Judges don't love emergency motions that turn out to be theater. He was quiet a second. I want you to think about something else, though. Whatever the judge decides Monday, I think you ought to move that jar and those bonds somewhere safer regardless. Not because Dale's right to ask, because a locked tower cab isn't a bank vault, and now half this county knows what's up here. Josie looked at the ammo tin again, at the jar inside it catching the gray morning light through the cab's grimed windows. Where would I even put it? Safe deposit box. First Community on Broad Street. Renata can walk you through it Monday morning, before whatever the judge decides. Doesn't cost more than $20 a year for a small one. $20, Josie repeated, almost laughing. Man saved $318,000 in coins and bonds, and it costs $20 to keep it safe now. That's usually how it works, Hollis said. The big number and the small number end up sitting right next to each other. The judge ruled Tuesday morning, one day later than Hollis guessed. Renata called with the news before Josie had even opened the store for her shift. Motion denied, she said. Judge wrote that the property's already sufficiently documented and secured, and ordering surrender before a hearing on ownership would, quote, prejudge the very question at issue. She let out a breath that sounded like it had been building for days. That's a win, Josie. A real one. Dale's not going to like that. Dale's not going to like most of what's coming, Renata said. But he brought the fight to a courthouse this time, not a diner. That's a mistake for him. Courthouses keep records. Josie moved the jar and the bonds into the safe deposit box that same afternoon, Hollis driving her down in his truck since hers was due for an oil change she couldn't yet afford. The bank teller, a heavy-set man named Curtis Boyd, didn't ask what was inside the metal box she carried in, just walked her through the paperwork and the little brass key that looked almost like a smaller cousin of the one she wore around her neck. $20 a year, he confirmed, tapping the fee schedule. Renewable every March. Josie paid it out of the gas money envelope. Counted careful, 4 5s. It felt strange spending a dead stranger's kindness on protecting a dead grandfather's kindness, but Hollis told her Earl would have approved of that math better than most. Word from the courthouse moved through Sable Hollow the way water moves downhill, finding every low place it could reach. By the following week, Josie had 2 more visitors at the IGA register, both of them older, both of them careful with their words, like the story mattered too much to get wrong. One was a man named Otis Pruitt, no relation to Hollis despite the name, who told her Earl paid off a tractor loan for him back in 2003, $1,100, left in an envelope the same way as always, no note, no ask for it back. The other was a school teacher named Ellen Marsh, who said Earl had quietly covered her class's field trip fees for 6 straight years running, never more than $300 at a time, always routed through the school office so nobody could trace it back to one name. I always wondered, Ellen said, setting a gallon of milk on the belt. Guess I don't have to wonder anymore. Josie told Hollis about both of them that evening, sitting on his porch again, the dog asleep now instead of working a bone. That's 5, Hollis said. 5 people now, just from folks walking up to your register. Ruth Ann, gas money, Otis, Ellen. Josie counted them on her fingers. That's 4. 5, Hollis said. Renata told me this morning somebody left an envelope at the courthouse addressed to whoever's handling the Vance matter. $200. Note inside said, use it for whatever this girl needs to keep fighting. No name signed. Josie sat with that a moment, the porch boards creaking under her as she shifted. People don't do that for a scholarship fund, she said slowly. They do it because they think I might lose. Maybe, Hollis said, or maybe they just know what it cost your grandfather to help this town quiet. And they don't want that kindness disappearing into Dale's dealership lot. He looked out at the dark tree line, same direction Dale had stared 2 weeks back. Either way, you're not walking into that hearing as some girl nobody's heard of. You're walking in as Earl Vance's granddaughter, and half this county's ready to say what that name's worth. Josie thought about the brass key sitting against her collarbone, warm from the day, and the smaller one now locked away at First Community Bank 2 miles down Broad Street. 2 keys now, 2 things worth protecting. 3 weeks left, she said. Feels like 3 weeks left, Hollis agreed, but Dale's spent $4,800 proving your grandfather's signature is real, $40,000 on a bad land bet, and however much that emergency motion cost him for nothing. That man's running out of moves and money at the same time. He stood, joints popping same as always, and looked down at her with something steady in his face. Next thing on that calendar is the hearing itself. After that, there's no more paper left for either side to file. Just a room, a judge, and whatever your grandfather left written down to speak for him. The call came in on a Thursday morning, right as Josie was pricing a shipment of canned beans at the IGA. Dale's lawyer filed the real motion, Renata said. No hello. Not emergency this time. This is his actual argument for the hearing. Which is what? Found property doctrine. Renata said it like she'd practiced saying it calm. Whitfield's arguing that anything discovered inside real property after probate belongs to the general estate, unless the will names it specific. He's saying the will named you the tower. It didn't name you a jar of coins hidden under the floor. Josie set down her pricing gun, even though Grandpa wrote my name on the note. A note taped inside a lockbox isn't the same as a line in a will, legally speaking. That's his whole argument. Doesn't matter what Earl meant. Matters what the paper says. That doesn't sound fair. Fair and legal aren't always roommates, Renata said. But I don't think Whitfield believes it either. I think it's the only card Dale's got left, and he's playing it because a bad hand's still a hand. She told Josie to bring every logbook up to Hollis's place that weekend, all 38 years of them, still stacked in the ammo tin's old spot at the Tower cab. Hollis had a folding table on the porch big enough to lay them out. Saturday came in cool for July, mountain air still holding some of the night. Hollis set 2 lanterns on the table even though the sun was up, said reading old ink went easier with light from more than one angle. Renata arrived with a legal pad and 2 pairs of reading glasses, since she said she never trusted just the one pair not to break. Doctrine only wins if the coins look like an accident, she said, pulling a logbook toward her. We need entries where Earl talks about you by name, tied to money, more than once. 1 time's a coincidence to a judge. 3 times is a pattern. 10 times is a man with a plan. They split the stack 3 ways. Josie took 1987 to 1994. Hollis took the years after that. Renata took the earliest ones, since her eyes were better with faded pencil than either of theirs. It didn't take long. Here, Hollis said, maybe 20 minutes in, tapping a page with one finger. March 91. Fixed the transformer at the Hollow substation myself, saved the county the contractor bill. Put half of what they would have paid into the jar. Josie's 2 years old today. That's not a coincidence, Renata said, writing it down. Josie found the next one herself, hands going a little unsteady on the page. October, 93. Bought no new boots this year. Old ones hold. Put the boot money in the jar instead. Josie's turning 4. Every year, Hollis said slowly, turning back through pages he'd already passed. Look here, 96, 98. Same thing. Different years. Same words nearly. He tied the jar to your birthday like a habit. Renata sat back, glasses down her nose. That's not hiding money, Josie. That's a ledger. A judge can read a ledger. They kept going into the afternoon, lanterns useless now with the sun high, coffee gone cold in Hollis's mug. It was Josie who found the one that stopped the porch dead quiet. It was dated the September she was 17. The ink looked different that year, shakier, like the hand behind it had aged all at once. Terrible year, it read. Buried my son and his wife on a Tuesday. Josie's got nobody now but me. And I'm not young. Put in $80 extra this month. She's going to need more than a tower someday. Lord willing, I live long enough to see her ready to climb it. Nobody said anything for a moment. Hollis looked out at the tree line the way he did when a thing hit him harder than he wanted to show. Renata set her pen down careful, like it might make noise. He knew, Josie said finally, voice thin. He knew that day everything had changed for me, and he sat down that same week and wrote in this book. Man buried his own son, Hollis said, rough now. And the first thing he thought to protect was you. He shook his head. That's not an accident, Josie. That's not scribbling, whatever Dale calls it. That's a father doing arithmetic on his own grief so his granddaughter wouldn't have to. Renata wiped under her glasses quick, like she hadn't meant for anyone to see it happen. This is the entry, she said. This is the one I read out loud in that courtroom, word for word, no softening it for anybody. They found 6 more like it before the light went orange over the ridge, each one small on its own. A birthday, a fixed transformer, a pair of boots not bought. Together they built something Dale's lawyer wasn't going to argue his way around easy. Whitfield's going to say a diary's not a deed, Renata warned, packing the logbooks into a banker's box she'd brought for exactly that purpose. He'll say intent isn't the same as instrument. He'll be right some. But the memorandum at the recorder's office is the instrument. These logs are the intent behind it. Together, that's not a girl who got lucky finding a jar. That's a girl her grandfather planned for since she was 2 years old. When's the hearing? Josie asked. 19 days, Renata said. Judge Aldridge, same courtroom where they'll rule on Dale's petition and yours both. Same sitting. Whitfield knows the deadline's tight. That's probably why he filed the doctrine argument now instead of waiting. He needs a win before Aldridge sees the ledger too. Hollis carried the banker's box to his truck himself, wouldn't let Josie lift it, said 38 years of a man's handwriting deserved careful hands. He set it on the passenger seat and buckled the seatbelt across it like it was a person riding along. "I'll keep this at my place till the hearing," he said. "Dale knows where you live. Doesn't know as much about where I live, and I've got a gun safe bigger than most men's closets. You think he'd actually come after the logbooks?" "I think a scared man with a boat lot he can't afford anymore does things a calm man wouldn't," Hollis said. "I'd rather not test which one Dale still is." That evening, back at her own kitchen table, Josie laid out the copies Renata had let her keep, the ones about the boots, the transformer, the year she turned 17. She read them again slower this time. No lantern light rushing her, no one waiting on a discovery over her shoulder. Growing up, she'd thought of her grandfather as a quiet man who fixed things and didn't talk much about feelings, the kind who showed love through a full wood stove and a plowed driveway instead of words. Reading the logbooks now, she understood he'd been talking the whole time, just not to her, to a page in a language only a judge and a granddaughter would ever need to translate. She thought about Dale's line from the will reading, the laugh that came before it, easy and careless like the sound of a man who'd already spent money that wasn't fully his. She thought about how many nights her grandfather sat in that cold cab with a pencil, doing arithmetic nobody was watching him do. For a granddaughter he wasn't sure would live long enough or need it enough to ever read it. 19 days. She said it out loud to the empty kitchen just to hear how it sounded. Then she picked up the phone and called Ruth Ann Bishop, the first name from the parking lot outside the IGA, the one who'd started this whole slow unraveling with a story about gas money and a note in shaky handwriting. "Ruth Ann," Josie said when the woman picked up, "I need to ask you something. Would you be willing to say what you told me in front of a judge?" There was a pause on the line, short, considering. "Baby," Ruth Ann said, "I've been waiting 19 years for somebody to ask me that question. Tell me when." Ruth Ann showed up at Renata's office 2 days later, driving a truck older than Josie's, carrying a folder of her own like she'd been keeping it ready for years. "I wrote it down," she said, sliding the folder across the desk. "Everything I remember. Dates, best I could recall them. Figured a lawyer'd want it in writing, not just talk." Renata opened it, read a line, looked up. "This says Earl covered your rent for 4 months in 2019. $210 a month." "Correct to the dollar," Ruth Ann said. "I paid him back when I could. He never once asked for it. Would you say that in front of Dale? Baby, I'd say it in front of God." By the second week of gathering statements, Renata had 6 signed affidavits stacked in a folder marked Vance versus Vance, exhibit list pending, Otis Pruitt's tractor loan, Ellen Marsh's field trips, Ruth Ann's rent, 2 more names Josie didn't recognize until she read them, a widow named Connie Shaw whose husband's funeral costs Earl had quietly split with the church, and a young man named Tobias Kell who said Earl paid his GED testing fee back when Tobias was 16 and too proud to ask his own family. "That's not 5 witnesses anymore," Hollis said, looking over the stack on Renata's desk. "That's a town's worth of receipts." "It's a pattern," Renata said. "Whitfield's found property argument needs the coins to look random. Every one of these statements says the opposite." Earl didn't stumble into generosity. He budgeted for it. Josie sat across from them, hands wrapped around a coffee gone lukewarm. "Does Dale know about all this?" "He will," Renata said. "I have to disclose the witness list before the hearing. That's the rule. No surprises in a courtroom, not from either side." She was right about the timing. 3 days after the witness list went out, Dale's number lit up Josie's phone for the first time since the will reading. She almost didn't answer. She did anyway. "Josie." His voice sounded thinner than she remembered, less certain of the room around him. "I want to talk. Just the 2 of us. No lawyers." "Renata says I shouldn't do that." "Renata's not your family," Dale said. "I am. Whatever's left of it." She almost hung up on that alone. Instead, she said, "Say what you want to say, Dale. I'll give you 40,000, he said. "Right now. Today. You drop the whole thing, I drop the petition, we're done. No hearing, no more of this town whispering behind my back. 40,000, Josie repeated, out of 318. It's real money, Josie, more than you've ever had at once. It's less than what you already spent on a boat lot you can't afford, she said. Renata told me that part too. There was a silence on the line long enough that Josie wondered if he'd hung up. You don't know what it's like, Dale said finally, watching your own father write a girl into a book like she mattered more than his own son. That landed different than she expected. Not like an insult this time, like a man admitting something he hadn't planned to say out loud. He buried your brother, Josie said quietly. My dad. Same week he started writing extra into that jar. Maybe it wasn't about mattering more, Dale. Maybe it was about somebody left with nobody. Dale didn't answer that. The call ended a few seconds later. No goodbye, just a click, and then the flat tone of nothing. She told Hollis about it that evening on his porch, the dog sniffing at her boots like it remembered her scent now, accepted her as regular. 40,000, Hollis said, low whistle following. He's scared. Or broke. Both, probably. Hollis rocked back in his chair. A man doesn't offer 8% of the total to make a problem vanish unless he's worried the other 92% is about to get read into a court record with his name attached to losing it. I told him no, figured you would. Hollis looked at her a long moment. How's that feel? Josie thought about it honestly before answering. Lighter, she said. Like I finally know I don't need his money to feel like Grandpa's. Renata filed the final exhibit list on a Tuesday, the affidavits, copies of the recorder's memorandum, and 4 of Earl's logbooks marked with sticky tabs at the entries about Josie's birthdays. Whitfield's response came back within 48 hours, dense with case citations Josie couldn't follow, but Renata read the closing paragraph out loud over the phone anyway. He's arguing the affidavits are irrelevant character evidence, she said. Says none of it proves the coins in that jar were meant for you specifically, only that Earl was generally a generous man. She paused. It's a weak argument, Josie. He knows it. But it's the only one he's got left that doesn't require admitting the memorandum settles it outright. So what happens at the hearing? I put Hollis on first, to authenticate the logbooks as Earl's handwriting and the recorder's memorandum as the real filing. Then I read the entries. Then, if I need it, Ruth Ann and the others testify to the pattern. Whitfield gets his turn to poke holes, Judge Aldridge decides. Renata's voice slowed. Careful now. I won't lie to you. Aldridge could still rule for Dale on a technicality. Judges surprise you, but I've built the strongest case I know how to build. Josie looked down at her own hands, the calluses she'd earned scanning groceries and climbing tower stairs both. When? Thursday, 9 in the morning. Courthouse on Broad Street, same building where you filed the memorandum copy weeks back. Renata's tone softened. Wear something warm. That courtroom runs cold, and you'll be sitting a long while before your name gets called. Thursday morning came in gray, fog sitting low over the ridge the way it did most July mornings before the sun burned it off by 10. Josie stood at her kitchen window with a cup of coffee she didn't finish, looking out at Route 215 disappearing into the mist toward town. She'd laid her clothes out the night before like Earl used to do before a long fire season. Everything checked twice. She wore his flannel jacket over a blouse Renata had helped her pick out. Sleeves rolled the same as always, since no amount of growing up had made her arms as long as his. Around her neck, under the collar, the brass key sat cold against her skin. Hollis picked her up at 8, the banker's box of logbooks riding in the truck bed under a tarp, tied down like something precious because it was. Neither of them talked much on the drive down the switchbacks, just the radio low and the tires finding the same curves Josie had learned by feel these last 2 months. You scared? Hollis asked, somewhere past the halfway mark. Some, Josie admitted. Mostly I keep thinking about Grandpa, sitting up in that cab, writing my name down before I even knew to look for it. That's a good thing to keep thinking about, Hollis said. Whatever happens in there today, that part's already true. Already happened. Can't nobody take a truth back once it's written down 38 times over. They pulled into the courthouse lot a few minutes past 8:30. Cars filled more of it than Josie expected for a Thursday morning probate matter. Trucks she recognized from the IGA parking lot. A sedan that had to belong to Ellen Marsh. Otis Pruitt's old Ford idling near the far fence like he'd gotten there early on purpose. Looks like you've got a crowd? Hollis said, cutting the engine. Josie stared out the windshield at the courthouse steps, at Renata already waiting there with her briefcase, and a look on her face like she'd slept maybe 4 hours and considered it plenty. Dale's car was parked closer to the building, a man Josie didn't know standing beside it in a gray suit. Whitfield, most likely, checking his watch. 19 days, Josie said quietly, remembering the number from weeks back. Feels like it went by both slow and fast at once. That's how the important ones always go, Hollis said, reaching back to check the tarp over the banker's box one more time before they climbed out. Come on, let's go make sure a judge hears what your grandfather already told the world, 38 years running. Judge Aldridge's courtroom sat on the second floor of the Transylvania County Courthouse, radiators clanking under tall windows, the flag standing a little crooked in the corner like nobody had squared it in years. Josie found a seat on the right side of the gallery, Hollis beside her, Renata already at the plaintiff's table arranging folders like a woman setting a table for company she trusted. Dale sat across the aisle with Whitfield, gray suit sharper than anything Josie had seen on him at the will reading. He didn't look over. She noticed that. A man who wasn't looking over was a man bracing for something. Behind her, the gallery filled in slow. Ruth Ann Bishop came first, dragging a folding chair closer when the pew filled up. Otis Pruitt sat with his cap in his lap. Ellen Marsh brought her daughter, the one whose field trips Earl had quietly covered, now a grown woman with a baby on her hip. Connie Shaw sat near the back, black cardigan buttoned to the throat. Tobias Kell stood against the wall, too nervous to sit. Half the county showed up, Hollis murmured. Word travels, Josie said. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Aldridge came in without ceremony, a woman maybe 60, reading glasses already on, file already open. Vance versus Vance, she said. Petition for determination of estate property and cross-petition regarding specific bequest. Let's not waste the morning. Mr. Whitfield, your motion first. Whitfield stood, buttoned his jacket. Your Honor, the tower parcel was appraised at $1, non-transferable, per the Forest Service lease terms. Any personal property discovered inside that structure after Earl Vance's death was not itemized in the will. Under settled doctrine, undisclosed found property of that kind reverts to the general estate to be divided per the residuary clause. That clause names Dale Vance as sole heir. And the coins, Aldridge said, not looking up from her notes. Roughly, how much are we discussing? Estimated at $318,000, Your Honor. Coins, bonds, accrued interest. A ripple moved through the gallery at the number, quiet, more breath than sound. Aldridge glanced up once, unimpressed, then back down. Go on. My client has already incurred obligations based on his understanding of the estate's value, Whitfield said. A $22,000 deposit on a commercial property in Brevard, non-refundable past the 60-day window, which closed 3 weeks ago. Reopening that valuation now creates real prejudice. Renata stood. Your Honor, if it please the court, prejudice isn't the standard. Testator intent is. I know the standard, Counselor, Aldridge said, dry. Sit down till it's your turn. Renata sat. Hollis leaned toward Josie's ear. She likes cutting lawyers down early, means she's paying attention. Whitfield kept going, laying out the found property doctrine in the careful language of a man who'd rehearsed it in a mirror. He cited 2 cases Josie couldn't follow, something about a farmhouse in Buncombe County, something about a coin collection in a barn loft near Asheville. In both instances, he said, courts ruled undisclosed valuables default to the residuary heir absent a specific contemporaneous instrument naming a different beneficiary. Contemporaneous, Aldridge repeated. That word's doing some work in your argument, Mr. Whitfield. It is, Your Honor, because whatever intent Ms. Vance's counsel plans to argue, none of it appears in the will itself. A will that Earl Vance revised himself twice in the last decade of his life. If he'd wanted the coins named to his granddaughter, he had 10 years and 2 revisions to say so in the one document that counts. He sat. Aldridge turned to Renata. Your turn. Renata rose slow, buttoned nothing, needed no ceremony. Your Honor, Mr. Whitfield's right that the will doesn't mention the coins. He's wrong that the will is the only instrument that matters. She lifted a thin folder. 11 years ago, Earl Vance walked into the recorder's office half a mile from this courthouse and filed a memorandum. Not a will amendment. A recorded declaration, notarized, time-stamped, naming his granddaughter Josie Vance as intended recipient of, quote, any personal effects, monies, or valuables located within the fire tower structure upon his death. Whitfield was already half out of his chair. Your Honor, that memorandum was never referenced in the will. It's an orphaned filing. It has no testamentary force on its own. It doesn't need testamentary force, Renata said. It needs to establish intent, and a recorded, notarized memorandum from the man himself does exactly that job better than a will ever could. But intent's not all I have. She set a second folder on the table with a small, deliberate sound. I have 38 years of Earl Vance's own Firewatch logbooks in his own hand, cross-referenced with his granddaughter's birthdays, in which he documents year after year exactly what he put into that jar and why. The gallery had gone very still. Dale's jaw tightened. Josie watched him not look at her, still, like looking might cost him something. I'd like to call my first witness, Renata said, Hollis Pruitt. Hollis squeezed Josie's hand once before he stood, walked up the aisle steady, as a man twice his age had a right to expect of himself. He took the oath, sat in the box, folded his hands. Mr. Pruitt, Renata said, how long did you know Earl Vance? 38 years. Trained under him starting in the spring of 1988. Worked that same tower alongside him till he retired in '99 and kept close to him every year after. Would you recognize his handwriting? Anywhere. Man wrote in pencil his whole life, pressed hard enough you could read the page from the backside. Renata handed him a logbook, tabbed pages marked with small yellow flags. Can you read the entry dated October of 1993? Hollis put on the reading glasses he kept in his shirt pocket for exactly this kind of moment. Bought no new boots this year. Old ones hold. Put the boot money in the jar instead. Josie's turning 4. And the recorder's memorandum, filed the same year Earl retired. Is that his signature at the bottom? That's his hand. I'd know it in the dark. Whitfield stood for cross before Renata had even fully sat. Mr. Pruitt, you weren't present when Mr. Vance wrote any of these entries, were you? No, sir. So you can't testify to his state of mind when he wrote them. Didn't need to be in the room to know a man's habits, Hollis said. Man wrote his granddaughter into that book every single year for going on 2 decades. That's not a state of mind. That's a pattern a blind man could track. A few people in the gallery let out something close to a laugh, quickly swallowed. Aldridge's mouth twitched, just barely. Moved to strike as non-responsive, Whitfield said. I'll allow the answer, Aldridge said. Keep going, Mr. Whitfield. Whitfield tried a different angle. The recorder's memorandum. You're aware it was filed as a declaration, not a deed transfer. Aware of it? Yes. And you're aware declarations of that kind are sometimes filed and then never acted on. People change their minds. People forget paperwork exists. Hollis looked at him steady. Earl Vance didn't forget things. Man logged the weather 3 times a day for 4 decades. Wasn't a forgetful bone in him. That's your opinion. That's 38 years of logbooks saying the same thing every page, Hollis said. Ain't opinion when it's written down that many times. Whitfield sat down harder than he needed to. Aldridge made a note, unreadable from the gallery, and looked toward the recorder's memorandum, still sitting on Renata's table. I'd like the clerk's index confirming the filing date, she said, not taking anyone's word for a timestamp in my courtroom. Ms. Calloway, do we have someone from the recorder's office available today? A woman near the back, gray cardigan, stood before anyone else could. I can speak to it, Your Honor. I've worked that office 19 years. Then we'll hear you after the recess, Aldridge said, checking the clock on the back wall. This court will resume in 20 minutes. The gavel came down light, more punctuation than force. The gallery exhaled all at once, a room's worth of held breath finally let go. Josie sat frozen a second, hand still tingling where Hollis had squeezed it before he went up. Dale finally turned and looked at her, not angry, something closer to worried. The 20 minutes ran long. Josie spent them in the hallway outside the courtroom. Hollis beside her, both of them quiet near a water fountain nobody used. Dale stood down the hall with Whitfield, heads bent together, voices too low to carry. He looks rattled, Hollis said. He should, Josie said. When the bailiff called them back in, the gallery filled faster this time. Word had gotten out into the hallway that something real was happening. Ruth Ann Bishop came back in fanning herself with a folded church bulletin. Otis Pruitt found his same seat. Judge Aldridge took the bench without looking up. Ms. Calloway, you're from the recorder's office. Yes, Your Honor. Deputy Recorder, 19 years. The woman in the gray cardigan stepped into the box, swore the oath, sat with her hands folded like she did this every week, because she did. Tell the court about the memorandum filed under Earl Vance's name. It came into our office on the 14th of March 11 years back, Ms. Calloway said. Filed in person, notarized same day, right there at our counter, by our own notary. Time-stamped when it came in, time-stamped again when it got recorded into the book. Any chance that date got altered later? Backdated? Resubmitted? Anything like that? No, ma'am. Our stamp's a machine stamp, tied to a ledger number. You can't move a ledger number. Number 4471 comes before 4472 and after 447. Oh, and that's just how it sits, forever. And the content of the filing? A declaration, 1 page. Names Josie Vance as intended recipient of any personal effects, monies, or valuables inside the tower structure upon Earl Vance's passing. Miss Calloway looked over at Josie once, brief, not unkind. I remember it, actually. Not many folks file something like that. Most folks just do a will and call it done. Do you recall Mr. Vance himself filing it? I do. He wore his uniform jacket that day, even though he'd have been off duty by then. Older gentleman, polite, said he wanted it done right in case anything happened to him up on that mountain. Whitfield stood for cross, buttoned his jacket again out of habit. Ms. Calloway, isn't it true that a memorandum like this has no binding force unless referenced in a will? I couldn't say what's binding. I just keep the ledger, so you can't testify to its legal effect. No, sir. I can testify it's real and it's old, and nobody snuck it in last week. A small ripple of sound in the gallery, quickly hushed by the bailiff's look. Whitfield tried once more. Isn't it also true your office processes dozens of memoranda like this every year, many of which are never enforced? Might be true. I don't keep count of what happens after it leaves our counter. Ms. Calloway folded her hands tighter. I only know what came in, and when, and whose name's on it. Whitfield sat. Aldridge made another note, longer this time, and turned back to Renata. Anything further, Counselor? One more exhibit, Your Honor. Renata lifted the second logbook, tabbed pages fluttering slightly. With the court's permission, I'd like to read 3 entries into the record. Each one ties a specific dollar figure to a specific year, in Earl Vance's own hand. Go ahead. Renata opened to the first flag. June, 1998. Sold the old chainsaw for $60. Didn't need 2. Put it in the jar. Josie's turning 9 next month. She turned to the second. April 2004. Overtime check came in higher than expected, $110 extra. All of it went in, told nobody. Josie's 15. She turned to the third and her voice slowed there, careful. March 2009. No entry about money this month, just one line. Buried my grandson today. Wrote double into the jar instead of eating out on my birthday like I always do. Some things you can't spend on yourself once you've lost somebody. The gallery had gone silent enough that Josie could hear the radiator ticking in the corner. Dale's hand, resting on the table in front of him, had curled into something close to a fist. That entry, Aldridge said quietly, is dated the same month as your late son's passing. Is that correct, Mr. Vance? Whitfield hesitated. I'd have to confirm the date, Your Honor. Confirm it during recess if you need to. I already have a related record in my own docket from a prior probate matter. I don't need it confirmed twice. Aldridge looked at Dale directly for the first time all morning. Mr. Vance, do you recognize the date? Dale didn't stand. He didn't need to answer from where he sat, but he answered anyway, voice lower than Josie had ever heard it. That was my boy, he said. That was the month we buried my boy. And your father wrote an extra deposit into that jar the same month, Aldridge said. Not unkind, just stating what the page said. I didn't know that, Dale said. Nobody ever told me that. It's written right here, Renata said, gentle, holding the book up so the gallery could see the page even if they couldn't read it from that distance. In his own hand, dated, witnessed by no one, because grief doesn't wait for witnesses. But it's there. Whitfield leaned toward his client, whispered something. Dale shook his head, small, like a man waving off help he didn't want anymore. Aldridge closed the file in front of her, unhurried. I've got what I need on the memorandum's authenticity, and I've got 30-some entries tying specific deposits to specific years of this young woman's life. What I don't have yet is Mr. Vance's own account of the estate, given he's the petitioner here. She looked to Whitfield. I'll hear from your client directly, counselor. Not through argument. Under oath. Whitfield's jaw tightened. Your Honor, my client's willing to answer questions, but I'd ask the court to consider. I'm not asking you to consider anything, Mr. Whitfield. I'm calling him to the stand. Aldridge glanced at the clock, then at the gallery, then briefly at Josie. Let's hear it from the man who filed the petition in his own words, before I decide whose intent actually governs that jar. The bailiff repeated the oath. Dale rose from the table slower than he'd sat down that morning, buttoning his jacket the way Whitfield always did, like it might hold something steady in him his hands couldn't. He crossed toward the witness box, passed within 6 feet of Josie's row without looking at her, and settled into the chair like a man walking into a room he no longer recognized as his own. State your name for the record, the bailiff said. Dale Earl Vance. Aldridge nodded to Renata. Your witness, counselor. Renata stood unhurried, folder still closed in her hand. Mr. Vance, you filed this petition claiming the coins found in that tower belong to the general estate. Is that right? That's right. You've already received the house, the land, both trucks, and the residuary cash balance from your father's estate. What was that residuary figure? $260,000, give or take. And you've used part of that already. A deposit on a commercial property in Brevard, $22,000. Dale's jaw worked once before he answered. Yes. Non-refundable per your own attorney's filing. That's what he told me. So if this court rules against your petition today, you're still holding $260,000 from your father's estate. You just don't get the extra $318,000 he set aside separately, over 4 decades for somebody else. Whitfield stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel's testifying. Sustained. Rephrase. Renata nodded, unbothered. Mr. Vance, did your father ever tell you, in any conversation you can recall, that the coins in that tower were meant for you? Dale was quiet a long moment. Long enough that Aldridge looked up from her notes. No, he said finally. He never said that. Did he ever tell you they were meant for Josie? Another pause. Shorter this time. Not in so many words, but I always figured whatever was up there was just his and mine by default, being his son. Figured, Renata repeated. Not told. Figured. That's right. Renata closed her folder without opening it, which Josie understood by now was a kind of punctuation all its own. Nothing further, Your Honor. Aldridge looked to Whitfield. Anything on redirect? Whitfield glanced at Dale, at the logbook still sitting open on the plaintiff's table, at the gallery packed 3 rows deep with people who'd already made up their minds. No, Your Honor, he said. No further questions. Then step down, Mr. Vance. Aldridge folded her hands on the bench, looked out over both tables, the gallery, the tabbed and dog-eared logbooks, stacked like proof nobody could argue away. I've heard enough for one morning. I'll take a short recess and then I'll rule. Dale didn't go far. He and Whitfield found a corner of the hallway near the elevator, away from Josie, away from Hollis, but not so far she couldn't hear pieces of it if she wanted to. She didn't try. She didn't have to. Whitfield came to her instead, 5 minutes before the bailiff called them back. He kept his voice low, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. Ms. Vance, my client would consider a settlement. $60,000 paid out of the coin value, rest reverts to him, avoids a ruling either side has to live with. Josie looked at him a long moment. He already told a room full of people I could have the rust bucket. Now he wants $60,000 of what was inside it. It's a fair number given the uncertainty. There's no uncertainty, Renata said, stepping in beside her. That's why you're offering now and not an hour ago. Whitfield's mouth tightened. I'll tell him no then. Tell him no, Josie said. He walked back to Dale, said something short. Dale's shoulders dropped half an inch, the way a man's do when a door he was still holding open finally swings shut on its own. The bailiff called them in. Judge Aldridge took the bench with a single folder in front of her, thinner than either side's, which meant she'd already decided what mattered and left the rest on her clerk's desk. The gallery filled in fast and quiet, like people finding seats in a church before a service they didn't want to miss. "I don't need closing arguments," Aldridge said. "I've got a will. I've got a recorded memorandum filed 11 years ago naming a specific person, and I've got 38 years of a dead man's own handwriting connecting the two. That's not a close question. That's a paper trail." Whitfield half rose. "Your Honor, the will itself is silent on the coins." "The will doesn't need to speak on it," Aldridge said, "because Earl Vance already spoke on it, in his own hand, in a public filing, for over a decade before he died. A general residuary clause doesn't override a specific contemporaneous declaration naming an intended recipient. That's black letter law in this state, Mr. Whitfield, and you know it. Or you wouldn't have tried to settle in my hallway 20 minutes ago." A ripple went through the gallery. Ruth Ann Bishop pressed her bulletin flat against her knee like she was trying to hold something down. "The petition asks this court to treat the coins, the bonds, and the recorded value inside that tower as undisclosed general estate property," Aldridge went on. "I find they are not undisclosed. I find they were declared, dated, and earmarked for one person, consistently, for 38 years. The petition is denied." Whitfield sat without being told to. Dale didn't sit right away. He stood there a second, hand on the table, like the floor had tilted under him and he was waiting to see if it would tilt back. "The full value inside that tower," Aldridge said, "the jar, the bonds, and any appraised total tied to Mr. Vance's log deposits, passes to Josie Vance as a specific bequest, not residuary, specific. That means it was never in dispute to begin with, Mr. Vance. It was just waiting for someone to read the paperwork." Dale sat down then, slow, both hands flat on the table like he needed it to hold him up. "Anything further from either side?" Aldridge asked. Whitfield shook his head. Renata didn't move. Aldridge closed the thin folder. "Then this matter's concluded." She looked past both tables, out at the gallery, and for a second her eyes landed on Josie, steady, almost gentle for a woman who'd spent the whole morning sounding like a hammer. "Ms. Vance, your grandfather did a very careful thing, a long time before either of us walked into this room. Don't let anybody tell you it was luck." The gavel came down once, quiet, final. The gallery didn't erupt. It exhaled instead, the way a held breath finally lets go. 40 or 50 people all at once, chairs creaking, somebody's cough breaking loose after being swallowed too long. Hollis put a hand on Josie's shoulder and didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything left to say that the ruling hadn't already said better. Dale stood again, buttoned his jacket out of habit, and turned toward the aisle. He had to pass Josie's row to reach the door. He stopped. "I really thought it was nothing up there," he said. "Not loud, not for the gallery, just for her. 50 years of nobody wanting that thing." Josie looked up at him. She thought about the flannel jacket, sleeves rolled twice, still hanging on a hook in the cab. She thought about the ice on the stairs she'd checked every Sunday so the place wouldn't fall apart, waiting on a man too sick to climb them himself. "Somebody wanted it," she said. "You just weren't looking at her." Dale didn't answer that. He walked out past the gallery, past Whitfield gathering folders off the table, past Ms. Calloway still seated near the back in her gray cardigan, and didn't look back once. Outside on the courthouse steps, the July light came down hard and white over Sable Hollow, over the low brick storefronts on Main, over the recorder's office half a mile down where a ledger number nobody could move had just decided everything. Hollis stood beside Josie, hands in his pockets, watching Dale's truck pull out of the lot too fast for a man who had nowhere left to be in a hurry to get to. 22,000, Hollis said quietly. "Gone on that dealership deposit. Non-refundable, way I heard it." "That's not my problem," Josie said. "No," Hollis agreed, "it surely isn't." Renata came down the steps behind them, folder tucked under one arm, and for the first time all morning, she looked like she'd set something down she'd been carrying a while. "Recorder's office will have the specific bequest finalized by end of week. After that, it's yours to do with as you please." "I know what I want to do with it," Josie said. Hollis glanced at her. "That's so. That tower's still Forest Service land," Josie said. "Still got a working stairwell. Still got a light that hasn't burned in 20-some years. She looked up toward the ridge, though from the courthouse steps you couldn't see it, just the shape of the mountains holding the sky up the way they always had. Feels like somebody ought to turn it back on. The July heat didn't let up on the drive back up Route 215. Josie kept the windows down anyway, elbow out, radio off. Hollis followed in his truck, close enough that she could see him in the mirror the whole way up the switchbacks. They parked at the gate together. Hollis worked the padlock, same as he had every week for 2 years, and swung it wide without being asked. "You want company," he said, "or you want the mountain to yourself a minute?" "Company," Josie said. "I've had enough of myself today." They climbed the access road on foot, gravel crunching, the tower coming into view piece by piece through the trees the way it always did. Cab first, then the catwalk, then the whole iron skeleton of it holding up against the sky. Hollis stopped at the base and looked up same as she did. "Forest Service still owns the ground," he said. "That much didn't change today. I know it. But they lease it for $1 a year to whoever holds the historic tower agreement. Your grandfather held that agreement 38 years. He glanced at her. Renata already checked. Agreement transfers with the specific bequest. You want it, it's yours to hold too. Josie looked at the stairs, the same ones she'd swept ice off every Sunday for 2 winters straight. What would it take, she said, to get the light working again? Hollis rubbed his jaw, doing the math the way he always did, slow and out loud. Lens is cracked in 2 places. New Fresnel panel runs about $1,800, if you can even find one. They don't make them anymore. You'd be buying salvage. Stairs need maybe 4,000 in pressure-treated stringers. The bottom thirds rotted worse than the top. He nodded up at the catwalk rail. Railings rusted through in 3 spots. Call it 400 more, materials only, if I do the welding myself. And the district office will want a reactivation permit. $150, paperwork mostly, safety inspection first. He looked at her. All told, you're looking at better than $6,300 before anybody's labor gets paid a dime. I've got more than that, Josie said. $318,000 more than that, near enough. That money's supposed to be your start, Hollis said. College, a truck that runs without you praying over it, a place of your own that isn't 50 years condemned. He said it gentle, not like an argument, more like a thing somebody needed said out loud once. Your grandfather didn't save it so you'd pour it back into a tower nobody but him ever climbed. He climbed it 38 years, Josie said. Every fire season, rain or shine, by himself, watching for smoke nobody paid him enough to watch for. She looked up at the cab, sun catching the tin roof of it. I think that's exactly what he saved it for. Just took him a while to say it plain. Hollis didn't argue that. He just nodded, the way a man nods when he's already decided he agrees and is only waiting to hear it said right. District Ranger's name is Sam Ferris, he said. Started under me back when your grandfather was still training me. I can call him tonight. Do it, Josie said. They didn't climb the stairs that day. Josie stood at the base a long while, one hand on the cold iron of the first step, and then she turned around and walked back down to the truck instead. Hollis didn't ask why. Some things a person climbed on their own time, not because a judge had just cleared the paperwork for it. 3 days later, Sam Ferris drove up in a Green Forest Service pickup with a clipboard and a tape measure, and Hollis brought a case of cold drinks like it was a social call, which for him it mostly was. Ferris walked the stairs slow, testing each tread with his boot before he put weight on it and made notes the whole way up. At the top, he stood on the catwalk a long minute, looking out over the ridgeline the way every fire warden in 100 years had looked out over that same ridgeline. Your grandfather logged more confirmed spot fires than any lookout in this district, Ferris said. 1968 through 99. We still teach new hires his notation system. He looked at Josie. Reactivating a decommissioned tower's rare. Takes a sponsor willing to keep it staffed during fire season, volunteer or otherwise. I'll staff it, Josie said. Ferris raised an eyebrow. You know what that means. April through October, minimum 4 days a week, no cell signal past the second switchback, and a radio check-in every 2 hours whether you've got anything to report or not. I know exactly what it means, Josie said. I've been driving up here every Sunday for 2 years anyway. Ferris looked at Hollis. Hollis just shrugged, like he'd told him so. I'll write the sponsorship up, Ferris said. Historic reactivation, volunteer spotter program. Might take a few weeks to clear the district office, but I don't see anybody saying no to it. He tucked the clipboard under his arm. Permit fees $150. You can pay it whenever the paperwork lands. I've got it now, Josie said, and pulled the folded bills from her jacket pocket before he could tell her not to bother. Word moved through Sable Hollow the way it always did, faster than anybody meant it to. By the following week, the hardware store on Main had a jar by the register with a hand-lettered sign taped to it. Vance Tower Relighting Fund. Somebody had drawn a little flame next to the words, crooked, like a kid's drawing. Josie found out about it from Ruth Ann Bishop, who caught her coming out of the diner and pressed a folded 20 into her hand before she could argue. Everybody in this town owes your grandfather something, Ruth Ann said. Some of us just never had a place to put it before. You don't owe me anything, Josie said. Didn't say I owed you, Ruth Ann said. Said I owed him. This is just where it's landing. She patted Josie's hand once and walked off before Josie could hand the 20 back. By the end of that month, the jar held $410, mostly in 5s and 10s, one $50 bill from somebody who never signed a name at all. Josie counted it out on Hollis's kitchen table, and neither of them said much about it, because some things didn't need much said. She kept the money separate in an envelope of her own, and on a Tuesday, she drove down to the gas station on the edge of town and left $40 folded under the wiper of a beat-up sedan that belonged to a woman named Cindy Osteen, whose husband had been laid off from the plant in April. She didn't sign her name either. Just wrote 4 words on the outside of the envelope, the only 4 words that felt right. Somebody helped me once. She didn't tell Hollis about that one. Some things a person did quiet, the same way her grandfather always had. The Stairs got their new stringers in early August. Hollis and 2 men he used to work fire seasons with hauling lumber up the access road in relay, sweating through their shirts, arguing cheerfully about whether the bottom landing needed 1 brace or 2. Josie worked alongside them most days, handing up boards, holding the level steady, learning which nails Hollis liked and which ones he cursed at. The new lens came from a salvage yard outside Asheville, packed in straw in the bed of Ferris's truck, and when Hollis fitted it into the housing at the top of the tower, he stood back and looked at it a long moment before he said anything. That's the same model your grandfather requisitioned in 1971, he said. Took the district 8 months to approve the paperwork back then too. He almost smiled. Some things don't change. The railing welds came last. Hollis running the bead slow and careful in the evening light, sparks dropping off the catwalk edge and dying out before they hit the ground. Josie watched from the top of the stairs, close enough to feel the heat off the torch, and thought about how many nights her grandfather must have stood in that exact spot, doing exactly nothing more dramatic than watching the dark settle over the ridge. It was near the end of August, the paperwork from the district office finally signed and stamped, when a truck she didn't expect came up the access road and parked at the gate. She recognized it before she saw who was driving. Dale's truck, the same one he'd pulled out of the courthouse lot too fast back in July. He got out slow, hands in his pockets, and stood at the bottom of the road, looking up at the tower like a man deciding whether he had any right to walk any closer. Dale stood at the bottom of the access road a long moment before he came any closer. Josie walked down to meet him halfway, boots crunching gravel, and stopped an arm's length off. "You lost, Dale? Heard in town you got the light working." He looked up past her, toward the cab, wanted to see it for myself. "See it then." She stepped aside. He didn't move. "That's not why I came." He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture she'd seen her grandfather make 100 times, though on Dale it looked borrowed, not owned. Dealership fell through. Whole deal. Bank pulled the financing once the paper on the estate cleared different than I told them. I heard some of that. 22,000's gone. Wasn't yours to give back? I know that. He looked at the ground. "I'm not asking you for it." "Good," Josie said. "Because I wasn't offering." A little quiet sat between them, the kind that isn't comfortable but isn't a fight either. "I said something ugly, back at the will reading," Dale said. "About the tower. You said a lot of ugly things. I know it." He met her eyes then. "I meant the part about nobody wanting it. I didn't mean it about you." Josie folded her arms. Doesn't much matter which part you meant. I heard both. I know that too. She let him stand in it a second. Then she said, You want to climb up and look at the lens? You can. Hollis put new glass in it last week, but you don't get to stand at the bottom and call it a favor to me. Dale nodded, slow, like a man taking a smaller portion than he'd hoped for and deciding to eat it anyway. That's fair. They climbed together, Dale a step behind her the whole way, testing the new stringers with his boot the same careful way Sam Ferris had. At the top, the cab door stood propped open, and the Fresnel lens caught the afternoon sun and threw a soft ring of light across the catwalk boards. Dale looked at it a long while. He requisitioned this same model back in '71, he said. I remember him talking about it at supper. Took the district 8 months to sign off. Hollis told me that too. He told you a lot, seems like. He was there for a lot, Josie said. You weren't. Dale didn't argue that. He walked to the built-in cot, ran a hand along the edge of the floor panel that had started everything, and for a second his jaw worked like he wanted to say something about the coins, about the 22,000, about all the arithmetic that hadn't gone his way. He didn't say any of it. He kept every logbook, Dale said instead. 38 years. I used to think that was just an old man with nothing better to do. It wasn't nothing, Josie said. It was proof. He just didn't know yet what it'd need to prove. Dale looked out over the ridge, the same view every warden before him had stood and studied. You gonna staff this thing yourself? All season? Every week I'm not in class. She'd start community college in the fall, 2 classes to begin, paid outright, no loan on it. Forestry management. Figured I ought to make it official since I've been doing the job for free 2 years already. That got something out of him that wasn't quite a laugh, but wasn't far off either. He'd have liked that. I know it, Josie said. Dale reached into his jacket pocket and came out with an envelope. Plain, unsealed, no writing on the front. He held it out. $400. It's not much against 22,000 I can't undo, but the boat lot's letting me manage the lot now instead of own it. First real paycheck. Josie didn't take it right away. What's it for? Whatever the tower needs next. Paint. A better radio. I don't know. He shrugged, awkward. A man handing over something he didn't have practice handing over. Just don't want to walk off from this place a second time. She took the envelope. She didn't open it in front of him. I'll put it toward the radio, she said. Ferris says the district one's cut out past the second switchback. Good. Dale looked at the cot, the floor panel, the whole small room that had cost him more than he'd ever thought a locked door could. I'm sorry, Josie, for the reading, for all of it. I know you are, Josie said. Doesn't mean we're square, means we're starting somewhere. That's more than I figured I'd get. Don't get used to it, she said, but there wasn't much heat behind it. Just a fact laid down plain, the way her grandfather used to lay down facts about weather he couldn't change and had stopped arguing with. Dale nodded once, turned, and started back down the stairs first this time, testing each tread out of habit now instead of suspicion. At the bottom, he looked back up at her, one hand on the rail Hollis had welded, and didn't say anything else. He just lifted his hand, short, the way men in Sable Hollow waved at each other across a gas pump, nothing more than that, and walked back to his truck. Josie watched him go, then climbed back up to the cab and set the envelope on the little shelf beside the radio, next to the jar that used to hold silver dollars, and now held nothing but a folded copy of Earl's note, the one that had waited under a floor panel for 11 years to be read. Hollis came up the access road an hour later with a coil of antenna wire over one shoulder, and found her sitting on the top step with the cab door open behind her. Saw Dale's truck heading down, he said. That go all right? Went as good as it was going to. She told him about the $400, about the boat lot, about the wave at the bottom of the stairs. Hollis set the wire down and sat next to her, elbows on his knees, looking out at the ridge, same as everybody who ever sat on that step had looked out at it. Your grandfather used to say forgiving somebody and trusting somebody were 2 different jobs. Said you could do the first one in an afternoon if you had a mind to. Second one takes longer, and some folks never earn it back at all. Which one's this? First one, Hollis said. Don't go handing him the second job's wages for first job's work. I wasn't planning on it. He nodded, satisfied, and picked the antenna wire back up. Ferris is sending the final inspection sign-off Friday. After that, this light's official. First season on record since '99. Josie looked at the lens, clean and new, catching the last low sun of the afternoon and throwing it soft across the catwalk boards. First season, she said, since he stopped climbing it. Word in town is people want to come see it lit, Hollis said. Ruth Ann's already talking about bringing a casserole up like this as a barn raising. It kind of is one. Kind of is, Hollis agreed, and got up to run the new wire through the housing, leaving Josie alone a minute longer on the step, looking down the mountain at the shape of Sable Hollow, settling into evening, lights coming on one window at a time in the valley below, same as they always had, same as they would keep on doing long after anybody remembered exactly why a girl of 19 had climbed back up here to keep a light burning. Nobody had asked her to keep. Friday came in clear, no clouds past the ridgeline at all, and Sam Ferris drove up the access road right on time with a folder under his arm instead of a clipboard this time. He set it on the hood of his truck and had Josie sign 3 places, then handed her the top sheet. Final inspection passed, he said. As of today, Vance Lookout is an active fire detection station, first one relit in this district since '99. Josie read the paper twice before she believed the words on it. Vance Lookout, she said. You put the name on there. Seemed right, Ferris said. Districts called it that in the old files for 60 years anyway. Never made it official till now. Hollis leaned against the truck bed, arms crossed, grinning like a man who'd been waiting all week to grin. Told you nobody'd say no to it. You did say that. I say a lot of things. Don't always turn out true. This one did. He pushed off the truck. Light works best after dark. You want to do it tonight or wait for some kind of occasion? Josie thought about it a second. Tonight. Figured you'd say that too. She spent the afternoon doing small things that didn't need doing, wiping down the lens housing that Hollis had already wiped down twice, checking the radio battery that Ferris had already checked, straightening the new logbook on the little shelf where the silver dollar jar used to sit. She'd bought the book herself, plain and black, same as the 38 her grandfather filled before her. Cost her $6 at the hardware store. Ruth Ann had tried to give it to her for free, and Josie had made her ring it up anyway. Hollis came up around 6 with 2 folding chairs and a thermos of coffee, and they sat on the catwalk while the light went soft and gold over the tree line, waiting on nothing but the sun to finish its business. Your grandfather used to say the last hour before dark was the best part of the job, Hollis said. Said the smoke shows up different against a low sun, easier to catch. He wrote that in the logs. I read some of them this week. Which ones? 74. There's a whole page about a lightning strike he caught before the ranger station even got the call. Logged it at 6:40 in the evening exact. She looked at the black book on her lap. I want to be that specific. Feels like it matters. It does matter, Hollis said. Ain't dramatic work most days, just paying attention when nobody else is. The sun dropped behind Fisher's Ridge a little after 8, and the valley went the color of a bruise healing, purple sliding into gray. Down in Sable Hollow, the first house lights blinked on, then a second, then the string of them along Main Street that never had needed his light to find their way, but tonight everybody in town seemed to know to look up anyway. Ferris said word got around, Hollis said, watching a knot of headlights gather at the gravel turnout below the access road. Half the county's parked down there. That's not what I expected. Nobody ever does. He stood, joints popping, and walked to the switch panel Ferris had wired that morning. You want to do the honors, or you want me to? It's my light, Josie said. I'll do it. She stood at the panel a moment, one hand on the switch, and thought about the brass key still hanging warm against her collarbone, the one that had opened this whole thing 11 months back when nobody thought there was anything behind that door worth opening. She thought about Dale standing at the bottom of the stairs saying nobody wanted the place. She thought about her grandfather's handwriting curled around one line taped inside a lockbox lid, the only inheritance that had ever actually explained itself. She threw the switch. The beam didn't sweep, not like a lighthouse, just came on steady and wide across the ridge, the way a lookout light was built to do, throwing a long, clean cone out over the dark trees. Down below, a ragged little cheer went up from the turnout, thin with distance but unmistakable, car horns joining in a beat later. Short taps, nothing showy. Hollis didn't say anything for a while. Then he said, 38 years, That light went dark every October and came back every April, regular as a clock. Then it just stopped. 27 years, dark. He shook his head. Didn't think I'd see it lit again. Neither did I, Josie said. Not really. Not until the floor gave under your boot. That's the part I still can't get over, Hollis said. One loose board. He built it loose on purpose. You said so yourself. Wanted it found by somebody who'd actually kneel down and look, not somebody just passing through. Hollis picked up the new logbook off the shelf and turned it over in his hands before he set it back down. Careful, like it already held something. You gonna write tonight's entry? Already know what it says. Josie sat down at the little desk built into the cab wall, the same desk her grandfather had used for 4 decades, and opened the book to the first blank page. She dated it. Then she wrote, in handwriting that still leaned a little like his did, though she'd never tried to copy it on purpose. Vance Lookout first watch reactivated. Clear skies, no smoke sighted. Light on. She looked at it a second, then added one more line underneath, smaller. Grandpa, I made it all the way up. Hollis read it over her shoulder and didn't say anything about it, just put a hand on her shoulder once, brief, and let it go. Down at the turnout, the cars stayed a long while, longer than made sense for just watching a light come on, engines idling, a few doors open with radios playing low. Ruth Ann Bishop's car was down there. Josie could tell by the shape of it even in the dark, and somebody had brought a folding table because there were shapes moving around it that looked like foil pans catching headlight glare. Hollis was right. It was turning into a kind of barn raising whether anybody planned it that way or not. You ought to go down and say something, Hollis said. They come all this way. Say what? Think you'll do. Josie looked at the beam sweeping steady over the dark ridge, then down at the little gathering of taillights and porch light faces 200 feet below. I'll go down, she said. I'm not making a speech. Didn't say you had to. They climbed down together, the new stringers solid under their boots the whole way, no give in them at all, and at the bottom Ruth Ann met her with a paper plate loaded higher than any one person could eat and a look on her face like she'd been crying a little and didn't want it mentioned. Your grandfather fixed my roof after the flood in '91. Ruth Ann said, like it was an answer to a question nobody had asked out loud, never took a dime for it. I've been meaning to pay that back 35 years and never had a place to put it. Guess I finally found one. She pushed the plate at Josie. Eat something. You look like you've been living on coffee and stubbornness. That's close to right, Josie admitted. Cindy Osteen was there too, off near the edge of the gathering, and when she caught Josie's eye, she didn't say anything about the envelope under the windshield wiper, just gave a small nod that said she knew exactly who to thank and wasn't going to make a scene of it. Josie nodded back the same way. Some debts didn't need saying out loud to get settled. Sam Ferris found her near the tailgate of his truck, coffee in hand, looking pleased with himself in the quiet way of a man who'd signed something that morning that mattered more than most of his paperwork. District office wants to know if you'd talk to the local paper, he said. Human interest piece. Girl relights her grandfather's tower, that sort of thing. Josie thought about that a second. Only if they run something about volunteer staffing at the end of it. District's short lookouts everywhere. You said so yourself. That's a fair trade, Ferris said. I'll set it up. She stayed at the turnout until the crowd thinned to just a handful of trucks, Ruth Ann's foil pans mostly empty, the beam still turning slow and patient overhead, and when she finally climbed back into her own truck to head down toward home, she looked up once more at the light doing exactly what it had done every fire season from 1961 to 1999, and for the first time since the will reading back in July, the tower didn't look like a joke anybody had ever meant to laugh at. It looked like exactly what it always should have been. The drive down off the ridge that night felt different than every other drive she'd made on Route 215. Same switchbacks, same gravel washboard past the third guardrail, same dark shape of Fisher's Ridge behind her in the mirror. But the light was on now. She could see it in the side mirror for almost 2 miles, a small, steady eye at the top of the mountain, watching the road she was leaving. She didn't cry. She'd done most of her crying back in October, alone on the catwalk with a busted collarbone and a note in her pocket. Tonight she just drove home and slept 9 hours straight, first time in a year. Monday morning, she used $60 of Dale's envelope to buy a used handheld radio off a district surplus list Ferris had texted her and put the rest, $340, into a coffee can on the shelf where the old radio's charger used to sit. She wrote Radio Fund on a strip of masking tape and stuck it to the can. It felt like the kind of bookkeeping her grandfather would have approved of. Small, exact, written down. She started her real shifts that week. Tuesdays, Thursdays, and both weekend days, sunup to sundown. Same hours Earl had kept for 38 years before her. Hollis came up the first Tuesday to make sure she had the radio checks right, then didn't come back the second Tuesday on purpose. "You don't need me hovering," he told her Monday night on the phone. "Man learns to drive with somebody in the car forever. He never learns to drive. I've been up there alone before." "Not on the clock," Hollis said. "Not with the district, depending on what you call in. That's different than doing chores for your grandpa. Today, it's official." So Tuesday, she climbed the new stringers by herself at 6 in the morning, unlocked the cab with the same brass key she still wore, and sat at the little desk with the black logbook open and a thermos of coffee going cold beside it. Nothing happened for 2 hours. Then nothing happened for 4 more. She learned that was most of the job. Watching nothing carefully, so that if something did show up, she'd already know what nothing looked like. At 2 in the afternoon on her second Thursday shift, she saw it. Not a plume, not yet. Just a thin gray thread rising off the ridge 2 miles past Kettle Creek, in a stand of pine she happened to know because Hollis had pointed it out once, said it hadn't burned since a lightning strike in '88. She watched it for 90 seconds before she trusted her own eyes. Then she picked up the radio. Vance Lookout to District Dispatch. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I've got smoke, bearing 240 from my position. Looks like it's sitting off Kettle Creek Road near the old '88 burn scar. Thin and gray, rising slow. No flame visible yet." The dispatcher's voice crackled back almost right away. "Copy. Vance Lookout. Say again your position." "Vance Lookout. Fisher's Ridge Tower." She said it plain, no hedge in it. "Formerly Earl Vance's station." A pause on the line. Short. "Copy that. Stand by." She stood by. She watched the thread of smoke thicken just slightly, then hold, not spreading, not dying either. 12 minutes later, dispatch came back. "Vance Lookout. Engines en route. Ground crew confirmed small debris burn. Landowner had a permit but let it run past the fire line. They're containing it now." "Good catch. This one could have walked into the burn scar and gone big in that dry pine." "Copy," Josie said. "Vance Lookout out." She sat back in the chair a second, hands not quite steady now that it was over, and looked at the thin, fading smoke until it stopped rising altogether. Then she opened the logbook and wrote it down. Time, bearing, description, response, same as her grandfather had written 1,000 times before her in the same square hand. She called Hollis that evening from the bottom of the tower stairs before she'd even started the truck. "Caught my first one today," she said. "I heard already. Dispatch radioed it through to Ferris. Ferris called me before you got off the mountain." Hollis didn't try to keep the pride out of his voice. Didn't seem like he was trying very hard. 12 minutes from first sighting to confirmed response. "Your grandfather used to brag when he did it in 15. I had a head start. I knew that tree line already." "Don't matter how you got the head start," Hollis said. "Matters you used it right." Ferris called 2 days later, said the local paper wanted the interview sooner than planned on account of the Kettle Creek catch, giving them a real story instead of just a nice one. Josie told him she'd do it on the tower, not in an office, and that the reporter better bring good boots if she wanted to climb up for the photo. The reporter's name was Marnie Sutton, young, maybe 5 years older than Josie, and she came up the access road on a Wednesday with a notepad and a camera and a granola bar she offered to split before they'd even started talking. "So it's true your grandfather left you the tower and everybody thought it was some kind of joke," Marnie said, pen ready. "That's really how it happened? My uncle called it a rust bucket in front of the whole family," Josie said. "Word for word, I heard him say it. And now it's the only working fire lookout left in this district," Josie said. "Feels less like a joke these days." Marnie wrote that down, smiling a little. District office mentioned there's a shortage of lookouts across 3 counties. Said you asked them to run something about volunteer staffing. "I did ask that." Josie looked out over the ridge. the pine stands rolling green and quiet all the way to the haze at the horizon. This job doesn't pay much and doesn't get much notice. But somebody's got to sit up here and watch. Might as well be people who want to. Your grandfather did it for 38 years. He did it because somebody had to, and he was good at sitting still and paying attention, Josie said. Turns out I'm good at that too. Didn't know it about myself till I had a reason to find out. Marnie flipped a page. One more thing, if you don't mind me asking. There's talk around town about an old note, something your grandfather left for you specifically. People are curious. Josie thought about the lockbox lid a long moment, the 12 words taped inside it that had started all of this. She wasn't ready to hand that line over to a stranger's notepad, not yet, maybe not ever. He left me a key, Josie said instead. That's the part people can print. The rest was between him and me. Marnie nodded like she understood there was a door she wasn't going to get through and didn't push on it. She took her photographs from the catwalk instead. Josie standing at the rail with the valley behind her, the lens housing catching the afternoon sun, and left before 4 so she wouldn't have to drive the switchbacks in the dark. That night Josie sat alone at the desk a while after logging the day's watch, thinking running through her head that she didn't write down anywhere, not yet, about her grandfather's handwriting, about a line that had waited 11 years under a floor panel to be read by the one person it was addressed to. She closed the book, latched the cab door, and started down the stairs toward the truck, the mountain going quiet and dark behind her the way it did every evening now, lit at the top by a light that wasn't going out again. 2 weeks after the Kettle Creek smoke, an unfamiliar sedan crawled up the gravel turnout at dusk, going slow like it wasn't sure it belonged there. Josie was locking the tower gate when she recognized the shape behind the wheel. Dale. He got out slow, hands loose at his sides, no boat dealership polo this time, just a plain shirt gone soft from washing. "Didn't figure you'd want me climbing up," he said. "Thought I'd catch you down here instead." "You figured right." Josie kept the padlock in her hand, didn't move toward the truck yet. "What do you need, Dale?" "Nothing." He looked up at the tower once, quick, like it still didn't sit easy with him. "Bank called my loan. Dealership deal in Brevard fell through end of last month. Wanted $41,000 back inside 30 days on account of collateral they said wasn't as solid as I told them it was. He said it flat, no self-pity in it, just a man reading out a fact he'd already made peace with. Had to let the truck go. This one's a rental car lot special, month to month. I heard some of that from Ferris." Josie didn't soften her voice, but she didn't sharpen it either. "I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry about the boat business. Didn't come here for sorry." Dale rubbed the back of his neck. "Came to say the line I said at the will reading was a mean thing to say in front of a room full of people, and I knew it was mean when I said it. Didn't stop me." He looked at her a long second. "You were the only one of us who ever drove up here in the cold to check on him. I knew that too. Said it anyway." Josie thought about the flannel jacket still hanging on a hook in her closet, sleeves still rolled from when she was 17, and it hung past her hands. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," she said. "It wasn't fine. But I don't want to spend the rest of my life hating my own uncle over a boat dealership and a bad sentence." She shifted the padlock in her palm. "That's as far as I've got tonight. Might be as far as I ever get. That's the deal. That's more than I came expecting." Dale nodded once, like a man accepting a number lower than he'd hoped for, but fair. "Your grandfather ever tell you I used to come up here as a boy? Before I got old enough to think it was beneath me. He mentioned it. Said you used to love the climb. Did for a while." Dale looked at the stairs a moment, then back at her. "Anyway, wasn't asking for money in case that's what you were bracing for. I wasn't offering any." "No," Dale said. "Didn't figure you would." He almost smiled, the closest thing to it she'd seen out of him since the courthouse. Then he got back in the rental car and pulled off down 215 the way he'd come, taillights shrinking small and red between the trees, and Josie stood at the gate a minute after he was gone, feeling less like something had been fixed and more like something had just finally stopped bleeding. She didn't tell Hollis right away, told him 3 days later, over the radio check, half expecting him to have some hard word ready about Dale showing up at all. He didn't. "Man's allowed to say a true thing late," Hollis said. "Don't erase what came before it. Don't have to. Just is what it is, sitting next to the rest." "That's about where I landed too." "Good. You don't owe him more than that." A pause on the radio, then Hollis again, different subject entirely, brisk about it the way he got when something official was coming. Ferris wants you to call him tonight. Says it's good news, wants to tell you himself. She called from the truck at the bottom of the mountain, engine still ticking as it cooled. Jackson County's got a tower just like yours used to be, Ferris said. No preamble, pleased with himself again. Bryson Lookout, up off the Tuckasegee side. Warden up there passed 8 years back, no children of his own. But he'd got a grandnephew he'd been mentoring since the kid was 12. Boy's 19 now. County's been sitting on that tower same as everybody sat on yours, calling it dead weight. Ferris let that land a second. District's putting the boy through the same volunteer program you're in, same logbook training Hollis gave you. We're calling it the Vance Protocol internally, whether you like the name or not. Josie sat with that a moment, the phone warm against her ear, the dark ridge behind her holding its one steady light. He know yet? The boy. Found out this morning. Ferris said he cried on the phone, then asked could he keep his uncle's boots in the cab, seeing as they still fit. Tell him yes, Josie said. Tell him that's exactly right. She hung up and sat there a while longer before starting the engine, thinking about a stranger's grandnephew up in Jackson County who was about to climb a locked stairway for the first time, same as she had, not knowing yet what waited past the loose board, if anything did. Maybe nothing would. Maybe just an empty cab and a job worth doing anyway. Either way, somebody had gone and made sure he'd get the chance to climb it and find out, instead of having the door sold out from under him before he ever got the key. That felt like the better ending to the story than any dollar figure ever could, and Ruth Ann's foil pans understood that if you asked around town. Autumn came on fast after that, the way it does above 4,000 feet, and the pines along Fisher's Ridge held their color while the hardwoods below went gold and then bare. Josie kept her Tuesday, Thursday, and weekend shifts through the last of fire season, logged 9 more small starts, only one worth an engine response, the rest handled by a single truck and a rake before they ever became anything worth writing home about. She kept the coffee can on the shelf, radio fund still taped crooked to the side, and by the first snow it held enough for a second handheld besides her own, which she gave to Hollis without asking whether he wanted it, on the grounds that a man who still climbed the ridge to check her stairs deserved better gear than a whistle and hollering. The district closed her tower down for the season in November, same as they always had in Earl's time. Canvas over the windows, logbook squared away on the shelf for spring. Josie made the drive up one last time before the roads turned bad, just to lock the cab herself and see the valley go quiet under the first real frost. She stood on the catwalk a long while, breath showing white, looking down at Sable Hollow small and lit below her. Porch lights and one string of Main Street bulbs, and Ruth Ann's kitchen window glowing yellow same as always. She touched the brass key at her collarbone, warm even in the cold, and thought about a man who'd spent 40 years watching this same view without ever once telling anybody why he kept it. Then she went down the stairs, latched the gate, and drove home in the dark, the tower black and quiet behind her for the winter, waiting the way it always had, patient for the season to turn and somebody to come back and light it again.